Hello everybody, just got to the job site. What we're going to do over here, we're going to be coating some sheetrock. This is going to be about a 2-day job. I'm here on the first day. What I'm going to do is, it's 4 sheets of drywall. They enclose the doorway, so it's both sides of the door. You'll see when I go inside. But I'm outside getting ready. First things first, I want to grab some plastic. And this, I'm just going to need some tape. So I'm going to first go inside, get the floors masked off, get everything masked off. If you don't have plastic, you can use tarps, old blankets, whatever you can use, but you want to put something down before you start mudding. That's step one. But let's go ahead and go inside, introduce ourselves to the client, and we'll get this all taped and first coated. It's going to be a 2-day job, so today we're just going to get it taped and first coat with a joint compound, straight box joint compound. I like to dump it in the bucket and then I'll mix it up, but we'll go through that process. So let's go ahead and go inside and kind of go over what we're going to do inside. Sheet and a half. They put plenty of screws in the existing sheetrock, but you want to put screws in the outside sheetrock to tighten it up. So I'm going to get this floor masked off, but I'm going to put a few screws to tighten up the existing. I'm not going to be doing too much talking, I'm just going to be working. So we're just going to get the floor masked off on both sides of this wall, throw some screws on the edges, make sure all the rest of the screws are sunk in since the homeowner sheetrocked it themselves. And then we're going to use fiberglass mesh tape, fiberglass mesh everything. Deep stuff like this, I might strike it in with a 5-minute hot mud, and then I'm just going to coat everything really heavy with a joint compound. We're going to let that joint compound set up overnight. Then we'll come back the next day and lightly sand it and then do a second coat with the hot mud and then turn around and do a spray texture. This is spray knockdown. So basically this was an entry doorway that they covered over basically. That's all they did there. So this is the bedroom side and we'll go look at the other side. spray glue is optional. I just like to use it because it helps the tape stick. Tape likes to stick to the new sheetrock, but it doesn't like to stick to painted walls as easily. See how it just falls off? So this is just an optional product. Just a little bit of spray glue, just to tack the tape up. That's all it's for. Little goes a long way. Alright, fiberglass. Fiberglass. I'm just going to mix a pan of 5 minute. What I'm going to do is just strike in all the tape. Basically it's like a pre-fill technique. So I know the hot mud gets inside this gap. You can also do a pre-fill before you do the fiberglass. You'd have to do it before if the gap is really big. If you can put your finger inside the gap, then you're going to have to pre-fill it before. But this is just a little gap here, so I'm just going to strike it in over the fiberglass, and it's just going to push in through the mesh here. So we're going to get some mud in there. That way I know the hot mud gets in there and it dries quickly, so the joint compound goes over and it'll dry nicely. So let's go ahead and just mix a pan of 5 minute. If you're not comfortable using hot muds, just use a joint compound. Just strike it in with a joint compound and then coat it out heavy. So this is a 2-day process, so we're going to just use joint compounds, come back, then on the second coat it with a hot mud, then turn around and do the texture. Let's go ahead and get it filled in. Alright, I'm going to mix some hot mud. Water, this is a 5 minute mud I keep in a bucket. I always keep lids on the bucket, keep stuff out of it, like water droplets and stuff. 6-inch knife, I'm using my good 6-inch knife, basically just scoop it in. I'm going to have to pre-fill a lot of stuff inside, plus the patch that I'm doing outside. So I'm going to do about 3/4 of a pan full of hot mud. I don't want to mix it all the way full of hot mud because I got to add water. 1 good sponge full, maybe 2. Add the extra water, and then we're going to have to toss and turn it. So that's why you don't want to fill the pan up too much, or you're just going to be making a big soupy mess all over the place. You want to keep all the water and stuff in the pan. You're just getting the water down to the bottom, just basically tossing and turning that hot mud, get it mixed up. I'm working with a 5 minute mud. I work with this stuff every day, so it's easier for me to work with 5 minutes. I don't recommend you using a 5 minute, maybe use a 20 minute, 40 minute, 90 minute. Need a little more water, go ahead and add some more water, fresh water. You also want to use fresh waters. You use dirty, contaminated water, sometimes it'll make the hot mud dry faster than it is. I'll be using a 20 minute or something, and then I use dirty mud, and the mud sets up in 10 minutes. So you always want to use fresh waters whenever possible. Throughout the whole drywall project, you always want to keep your water clean when possible. Clean, fresh water, make the project go well. Mixed up thoroughly. Consistency is pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy. It's creamy, it's not clumpy, but it's heavy. It's basically a pre-fill first coat consistency. Most guys like to start with a 10-inch knife for first coat, but I use a 12-inch knife for everything. Let's go ahead and get everything pre-filled. Got my hot mud ready, so we got to work quickly. Basically just going to strike in the tape. Pushing the tape, pushing the mud inside the tape. Since this is just a pre-fill, I can mud over it, but I'm going to go over it with a sponge and a 6-inch knife and just take off any extra to make sure the mud's pushed in there. Get rid of any edges. You don't have to do this step, but it's easier to do it well if you have a sponge out. The mud's already set up. That's why I like to get that hot mud in there, because it really seals up the seam, seals up the tape, so I know it's really on there and strong. Basically, it's one step you do to prevent cracks. If it cracks past this, then you definitely did something wrong. But it's pre-filled with the hot mud over the fiberglass mesh tape. So let's go ahead and follow it through with a 6-inch and a sponge. That just pushes all the mud in, gets rid of any humps and boogers, so when we go to coat it, the mud goes on nice and perfect. So now I'm just going to follow through and I'm going to do a joint compound, almost straight out of the box, but I'm going to add a little bit of water so I can work with the mud. I'm going to put a nice heavy coat on these seams, blow it out pretty heavy with the first coat, joint compound, that way it lets it dry overnight, come back tomorrow and do a second coat. Let's go on the other side of the wall and do the same thing with the 6-inch. Alright, so I'm using joint compound. This is joint compound that was in a box. I just dumped it in a bucket. The mud right out of the box is really heavy, so I like to add a little bit of water. Use fresh water. I already put a sponge of water in there, about a sponge, no more than a sponge. You don't want to make it creamy and wet, make a big mess with your coating, so you're just adding enough water to make it nice and creamy. I use a mud mixer like this, a hand beater, potato masher. It's easier. You can also use a drill method with a mixer, running extension cords, cordless, whatever you want to do. I use this in the field. Since I'm doing a first coat, I don't have to make this like pancake, creamy, whipped mud like I would for texture. It just needs to be mixed up because I'm going to do a first coat. First coat, real heavy mud. So we're just going to get everything first coated today with the joint compounds. It's later in the day. It's about 4 p.m. So I'm just late in the day, into my work day, last job. So I'm just going to finish it off here with the first coat and come back tomorrow and do the second coat with hot mud, then texture. Let's go ahead and get this mixed up. I'm going to show you how I mix up joint compounds right out of from the box into the bucket. I like to dump it in there. Some guys like to mix in the bucket. Some guys like to mix in the box. I don't like to mix in the box because it's in a plastic, and if you rip the plastic, you're making a big mess. So I like to just work out a nice bucket so I don't make a big mess. Let's go ahead and get this all mixed up so we get nothing to it. I like to work, some guys like to mix on the ground. I'm working off my tailgate so it's easier, so I can use a short handle. You're just basically getting that stopper down to the bottom, getting some of that water down the bottom. The mud's really thick. So you're just making it, get it mixed up, put a little bit of elbow grease behind it. It's a good workout. Really get it whipped up. You don't have to get crazy with mixing up, but you want to get it nice and creamy. You don't want no clumps in the mud. I'm going to coat everything just using a 12-inch. Some guys like to use a 10-inch knife, but I just use a 12-inch. You can take your mud bucket in the work area, but I don't want to carry around a 50-pound bucket of mud. So I'm just going to come out here, fill up my pan. I'm using a bigger pan. So I'm just using the stomper almost to scoop it up. That's how thick the mud is. Scooping it right in. Since it's hot out, I'm going to keep the lid on it. I don't want stuff to dry in it. I'm going to coat it with my 12-inch knife and my 6-inch knife, my go-to knives. Let's go. All right. Nice and heavy. See how it works nicely for first coats. Basically, let's get the whole joint done. pour the whole pan of mud on. Feather my edges. Pretty heavy, so I'm kind of blowing it out here. Better, I can see the top part's deeper than the new sheetrock part, so I'm going to put more mud on the outside edge. Reach in here, feather your edge. Feather your edge. Feather your edge. Now, flatten it out. There's a crack there that I'm fixing also. It goes past the sheetrock. The joint's the easiest part. These are more like tie-ins. Feather your edge with your knife. I like to do put more pressure on this side since I'm going to feather this side. And I'm going to feather this side, so I'm putting more pressure on this side of the knife. Any lap marks, go ahead and screw nails. Go ahead and nice coat over there, tight coat. Almost did a whole pan, got this wall coated out with one pan. One more point here. I'm going to go up to the angle of this one. Double check everything. Pretty much used all this mud, so I'm going to go get another pan of mud to do the other side. The baseboard's going to cover the nails on the bottom, but you can go ahead and put a coat on the nails on the bottom if you want. Any goobers, anything off the wall, scrape them off. It's easier to do it now while they're wet. Let's go ahead and get another pan of mud and do the other side of this wall. Everything will dry quickly overnight. If you have a fan on, you can leave a fan on, but it'll pretty much do its own thing. You don't need to speed dry it or anything. Joint compounds, basically floated out. That hot mud underneath it, it really got inside the gaps, so it'll keep anything from cracking out. Sometimes the regular joint compound isn't dry inside the tape gap, so then you go to coat it and then you'll get a little hairline crack. So that's why you like to do that hot mud first, so you don't get that hairline crack in your seams. Sometimes you'll see hairline cracks. That's because they didn't do a pre-fill. That's why I like to do the hot mud. Plus it helps the regular joint compounds dry quicker on the joint seams where the hot mud is. Pretty much let it do its thing, both sides of the wall. We'll come back after this dries, do a light sanding. I didn't coat it super heavy, so I'm just going to do a light sanding just on the lap marks. Any rough areas, the edges, you can sponge them off. But we're going to just do a light sanding, like 80 grit, 100 grit, and then we're going to follow through with like another coat of 5 minute or 20 minute. If need be, touch it up, and then we're going to just prep everything for the spray texture with a hopper and just spray it with the spray knockdown. Just basically spray this whole wall area. I don't want to get texture on the new wall here, so I might run masking on this wall, even though I got to do a patch here. But we're going to mask the angles so you don't have to sand, primer, and paint this wall, just the wall that they're actually working on. But then we're going to let this dry overnight. That's day one, trip one, taped, pre-filled, and first coated with a joint compound. Scrape your extra mud. You don't want to waste joint compounds, so that's why you want to put it in a cap bucket. If the mud's dry and has boogers in it, just trash it, but if it's still creamy good, I like to scrape the sides of the bucket and then just add water on top of it. They call this capping it off. Just run sponge on the side to get all that caked up mud off the sides, and add some water on top. You want the water to cover the mud. Clean up the bucket. You don't want, this is called capping off. I have videos on called capping off joint compounds. Basically, you used a half a bucket or a half a box of mud to get everything first coated. So you got the water capped off, and then I just keep a lid on the bucket, so then it's ready to go for the next day. Get everything cleaned up. If you're lucky, you got a hose hookup. If you have a hose hookup, then it's a good day for you. Get everything cleaned up. You know, it's middle of July here. We don't want this tools are all caked up and drying. So you want to get everything cleaned up. Clean up your hands, clean up the bottom of your shoes, clean up your work area, get everything cleaned up. If you're done for the day, clean up. Don't say you'll clean up at the end of the job. Just clean up each day, each trip. Just clean up as you're done. It makes cleanup at the very end a lot easier. You don't want to make a big mess. Drywall's messy, so just clean as you go. It's the easiest way.